Steve and Mike, I can't even imagine what you all were thinking at that, and what you all were feeling at that moment. What a thrill. And I can't think of a better way to start our evening than with that clip from almost 50 years ago, because it's because of that event brings us all together tonight. And we're going to have a great year celebrating the 50th anniversary of President Ford going to the White House, and Mrs. Ford too. I'm Gleaves Whitney, and I have the joy of serving as the executive director of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation. Now, we're gathered on the cusp of a 50th anniversary, and as I recall, that's a golden anniversary, is it not? And golden anniversaries make you think of what? Enduring love. And I got to tell you, every day when I deal with all the people who are associated with the Ford, with the Ford family, with the trustees, with the donors, the volunteers, the teachers who come in and teach for us, love is the apt word to use. Love and respect for the Fords because of what they achieved. You know, President Ford served at such a dark and dangerous time in our nation's history. So his presidency was significant, and we can't forget it. Think of the accomplishments. Let me just take you a little bit on a tour, very briefly, of some of the accomplishments of our 38th president in his 895 days in office. Think of what he did, for example, to help right the nation constitutionally. We faced the worst constitutional crisis since the Civil War, and President Ford guided us through it. We faced the worst economic times back in 1974 since the Great Depression, and President Ford led us through it. Think of how he energized, unleashed the entrepreneurial capacity of the American people when he began revolutionary, path-breaking deregulation, totally reversing the previous decades of government. That's what he did domestically. And then think of what he did in Helsinki and in foreign policy when he met with Brezhnev. When he got Brezhnev to sign the Helsinki Accords, when that meant for the first time in the existence of the Soviet Union, they were forced to let the people within the Soviet Empire criticize them on the international stage for their violations of human rights, thus giving us an opportunity to take those steps to end the Cold War. And then think of 1976, the bicentennial year, when President and Mrs. Ford led us to rediscover our country. A country in the previous decade we had a tendency to forget at times. It was a marvelous period where Americans all of a sudden were reawakened to the patriotism, the true love of country. Not a jingoistic, horrible thing, but a true love and necessary love for our country so that we could continue to achieve things, be the best, the last, greatest hope on earth for humankind. And then what he's always praised for, and we can't say it enough. Think of what President Ford did to restore trust in his government, trust in the American people to do the right thing, bringing candor and truth to government again. As he says in his swearing-in ceremony just a few moments after this clip, truth is the glue that holds civilization together. Think of that. Civilization itself was on the line, and he knew it. And look at the gifts of his character, his integrity at the helm that he brought to us. He turned our nation around. And let us not forget Mrs. Ford. There she was. We all have such great admiration for Mrs. Ford at the foundation. How many women's lives did she save when she called for women to go get those mammograms, pay attention to their health, deal with their doctors directly? How many families did she save when she went through an intervention and she made it all right for the American family to have those tough conversations and interventions that are necessary, sometimes for a family to rebalance itself? How many young women did she inspire when she, kind of went against the grain and she supported the Equal Rights Amendment? She was independent. In fact, Mrs. Ford, we don't want to neglect, because in a recent poll, she was considered the #1 First Lady of the past 60 years. How do you bottle such significance in these two remarkable individuals? Great people. Well, I think that we have to go to the words of some people who have done a lot of thinking and writing about it. One of my favorite passages is from Jim Cannon, who said, "From its beginning, American democracy has had the good fortune to produce a leader, often from an unexpected quarter, whose character and actions fit the tide of history. So it was on August 9th, 1974, when this good and honest man, this obscure and stolid workhorse of a congressman from the heartland of the nation, came to the rescue of the American government. To Gerald Ford was given the responsibility to move America from untruth to truth and from darkness to light." Now that was telling us something about ourselves as Americans. Did he have a world historical significance? Well, Henry Kissinger thought so. Henry Kissinger said, "According to ancient tradition, God preserves humanity despite its many transgressions because at any one period there exists just 10 just people who, without being aware of their role, redeem humankind." Gerald Ford was such a man. I don't know how you pile on any accolades after those two witnesses. But what it means is, this, as we near this golden anniversary on August 9th, is that we have a golden legacy. It's been given to the Ford Foundation to promote that legacy. And you know, for the past 43 years, the Ford Foundation has done so much with several platforms. We have the Ford Presidential Library in Ann Arbor. We have the Ford Presidential Museum just across the river. We have the DeVos Learning Center for K through 12, where our teachers work with the teachers in our schools. We have the Ford Leadership Forum, where we take the college and young professional crowd and we realize, we understand that they're still in moral and intellectual formation. And we give them a home. We give them a place where they can continue to grow. And they're thriving in it. And then, of course, there's the foundation itself. A foundation that shepherds the other four platforms, supports them financially, supports them intellectually with high-powered programs, and spreads the word, doing what we're doing tonight. So it's really a wonderful golden legacy. And then here we are, you and I, tonight, together. We have the charge to take that legacy to a new generation. We're not just going to sit on this. We're not just patting ourselves on the back. This country needs a new generation of leaders, and we have identified a lot of emerging leaders with whom we can work at the DeVos Learning Center, the Ford Leadership Forum, working with our partners at NARA, at the Ford Museum, and we're really proud of that. And so here we are, and I just want to take, this is sort of now the credits part of my talk, and then I'm going to get off stage, but I do want to say that we are so privileged to have so many people in this room who are so invested in all the work that is done under the name of the Ford, whether it's at the library, museum, DeVos, Ford Leadership Forum, Foundation, all of it, and we thank you. So I want to just say, first of all, thank you to our very special guest, Mitch Daniels. We are so pleased that he will be receiving the medal later this evening, the Ford Medal for Distinguished Public Service. And I've got to say, this came up in a staff meeting earlier today, this medal, Governor Daniels, is going to be a lot cooler than all those medals that are given out at the Olympics later. Then we have our esteemed journalism winners from the Washington Post, Military.com, and the Voice of America. Great job. Keep spreading the word. It's so critically important to keep identifying and rewarding our best journalists. Then we have the Ford family who are here. Mike, Steve, Greg with his wife Carla, Bob with Karen, Laurie Ford Cassidy, her husband Gary. We always appreciate the Ford family's participation and enthusiasm for the work we do. We couldn't do our work without their enthusiastic participation. And then we've got trustees. I think we've got more than 22, 23, 24 trustees here in the room. I can't call on all of you. Just raise your hand, though, if you're a trustee of the Ford Foundation. Thank you so much. I do have to say a special note. We have the outgoing chair, Mike Jandernoa, and we have the incoming chair, David Hugendorn, who are with us this evening. Thank you both for your service. Then we've got so many great sponsors. We have, University of Michigan Ford School. We've got Marty and Sue Allen. We've got Steve and Angela Ford. These are the people who made tonight's program possible. Mark Halzema, Laura Hills, Dave and Deb Hugendorn, Mike and Sue Jandernoa, Nate Miller, Kelly Miller. We got Meyer, the Honorable Bill and Cynthia Schutte, Karen Scowcroft, the Peter and Joan Secchia Foundation, Frank and Kathy Orsamorso, and as I said, the Ford School of Public Policy. Thank you all for making this evening possible. We have so many wonderful friends of Ford. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, some 700 friends of Ford. One friend of Ford, though, who has been assiduously working at making sure that Ford Observer comes into your mailbox every Thursday, Hillary Snell. Hillary, I don't know where you are, but thank you so much. Oh, and the partners we have. The partners are the glory of our work because they double the joy and have the burdens of the work. We have such great partners at the Ford School of Public Policy, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, Albion College, the Ford Institute there, the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan. I was able to say hi to a lot of you in our reception. Thanks for making sure that we have these great partnerships to spread the word. We're a multiplier force. Also, I just want to say, events like this, they require wonderful staff here at the JW to put everything on. And then our staff at the Ford Foundation is just fantastic. I thank all of them. I want to give a particular shout out to Rachel Siglo because of all of her hard work to do the logistical planning. Let's give it up for Rachel. And we have a DJ, Andrew, who I hope you enjoyed the 70s vibe, right? Okay, well, so now we're going to get on with the party. We're going to now turn to the journalism part of our awards evening, and we're going to invite two people up front. Mike Ford, the eldest son of Jerry and Betty Ford, is going to come up. He is going to join us. He's also going to give an invocation in just a minute. And then Roger Porter, who is at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, will also be here. And both of these fine men are also trustees of our Ford Foundation. Give them a hand.
Greetings, friends of Ford. It is great to be back in Grand Rapids for this special 50th anniversary celebration. And I want to thank Gleaves for the wonderful introduction, just kind of bringing us back to 1974 and taking us through the legacy of my father and mother. And just that moment in history when I know for myself and my wife Gail, it just flipped our lives up and down in a challenging way, but in a good way. And to see that video of the swearing in, honestly, every time I see it, it's very emotional for me. But it's a beautiful thing to be able to celebrate that and, kind of lift that up. And that's what we're going to do this evening. We're going to start with the Gerald R. Ford Journalism Awards. And I have my co-chairman Roger Porter here. We're working side by side. But first of all, I want to thank the judges for their time and their expertise in reviewing all the applications for the two journalism awards for the presidency and for national defense. And the chairman for the presiding over the president judging was John McConnell, and chairing the National Defense Committee panel was Paula Trimble. Our other judges who served are Michael Chamness, Heather Devers, Jennifer Alizia, Paul Hagner, Robert Holzer, Bill McBride, Candy Nelson, David Olive, Gail Rainman, Mark Roselle, Karen Scowcroft, Mark Troutman, and Debbie Van Opstal. And just give them applause, please, for their good work. So each year, the Gerald R. Ford Foundation awards 2 distinguished journalism prizes, one for the reporting on the presidency and the other for reporting on national defense. And these prizes, initiated in 1988, recognize reportorial excellence and the fostering of better public understanding of the presidency and national defense. And so to start us, the first award, the 2023 Gerald R. Ford Prize for Distinguished Reporting on the Presidency goes to White House Bureau Chief Toulouse Oranipa of the Washington Post. And if Toulouse could come forward, yes, please join us on the bench. You stand there. I'll say a few words. You'll see the full citation there, but I'm going to share a few excerpts. As President Joseph Biden Jr.'s third term in office unfolded and his team began preparing for the 2024 campaign, the reporting of Toulouse Oranipa of the Washington Post stood out for its balanced, insightful, historical, informed coverage of the presidency. Across a wide range of topics involving the presidency, Oranipa reporting showed consistent strength both in covering the issue of the moment and in giving that moment historical context. For his skill and breadth of vision, the selection committee and the foundation honors Toulouse Oranipa, White House Bureau Chief of the Washington Post, as the 2023 recipient of the Gerald R. Ford Journalism Prize for Distinguished Reporting on the Presidency.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know what to say. This is such an honor. Just listening, I deal with words for my career, and just listening to the number of adjectives that were just listed, balanced, insightful. I like distinguished, especially with this prize. So I'm really grateful, especially to the judges, to everyone at the Ford Presidential Foundation. This was quite an honor, and my goal over the next year and beyond is to be worthy of this award. So thank you so much. I've got a few more people to thank as well. At the Washington Post, it is an incredibly collaborative organization and environment, and I'm really accepting this award on behalf of my entire team, who make me look good because they are so good at what they do. That starts with the editing team at the Washington Post, editors including Naftali Ben-David, the White House editor at the Post, who has been overseeing a team that has won this award 3 years in a row, and that speaks to how good of an editor he is. He makes every story better, and my stories are very much included in that. Dan Egan, our politics editor, Phil Rucker, our national editor, and so many other leaders at the Post who have the Midas touch for making stories look better and better as they work with them. I especially want to thank the rest of the White House team at the Washington Post, including Yasmin Abutaleb, Cleve Woodson, and last year's winner, Tyler Pager, and the 2022 winner, Matt Visor. Together, it's really a rock star team of reporters who make my job easy and make me look like a much better reporter than I actually am. Finally, I just want to thank my family, who worked behind the scenes to make it possible for me to do what I do, especially my incredible wife and my young son who couldn't be here but are cheering me on and are the ones who are really doing the hard work of making it possible for a reporter to look good and do their job when it often involves late nights, weekend work, travel, and all the other things that make it possible to cover the presidency. And I also want to congratulate the other winners who have done incredible work, and what we've heard today about the importance of journalism is why we do what we do. We want to keep the public informed. We want to make sure that people have the information they need to make the right decisions, and it's hard. It's getting harder. It's getting more complex. It's financially challenging in our industry, but I'm hoping that tonight and the important work of the foundation to recognize good journalism will redouble our efforts and make us more capable of doing this job as we go forward. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This year's award for the Gerald R. Ford Journalism Prize for Distinguished Reporting on National Defense in 2023 goes to a team of journalists from Military.com, Travis Tritton, Konstantin Toropin, Drew Lawrence. Would you please join us on the stage to receive your award? Three of these team members are U.S. military veterans. The Military.com team multi-series on extremism and the U.S. military was insightful, detailed, and sobering. Each of these timely articles were presented in a factual, matter-of-fact style that was free of the sensational rhetoric and bias that we often find in articles. This series also reveals that Pentagon leaders in each of the military services need to understand the gravity of the issue and develop more comprehensive mitigation strategies for the future. The reporters conducted a series of extensive interviews with current and former military personnel, members of extremist organizations, and experts to produce a series with the kind of sourcing, research, and writing that are rare in today's rapid news cycles. This is exactly the kind of superior journalism that the Ford Prize seeks to recognize and award each year. Thank you.
Wow. First, I'd just like to thank the Ford Foundation for this great honor and also its hospitality tonight. Really looking forward to the steak. We all deeply believed in this project on extremism and the military, but I also believe this is indicative of the other great journalism that Military.com has been doing over the last several years. None of that would be possible without our excellent reporting team. I really believe it's the best reporting team in the business. Some of the reporters are here tonight. Konstantin Toropin is our Navy and Pentagon reporter. Drew Lawrence is our Marine Corps reporter. And Steve Bainan, our intrepid Army reporter, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening. I also really wanted to thank Zach Fryer-Biggs, who is our managing editor. It's really been his vision and leadership that brought this project together, but also has allowed Military.com to really become a journalistic powerhouse over the last several years. This project was really about how extremist groups prey on veterans, and also how veterans turn to extremism and violence. All of the experts who I spoke to unanimously said the warning lights are all flashing red, that we're at a dangerous crossroads in history. We, in our reporting, detailed numerous plots, potential violence. The Oklahoma City bombing by an Army veteran, Timothy McVeigh, 3 decades ago. Could that happen again? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, it could. And through our reporting, we showed that the Pentagon really needs to do more to try to head off this risk. We don't do this work for awards, but it does feel damn good to have your work recognized, especially when you believe in it so strongly. This will likely be some of my last stories as a reporter. I'm a full-time editor now. But for these reporters and the rest of our reporters, this is just the beginning of what I'm sure is going to be very, very impressive journalistic careers. So we're just incredibly proud of the work that they're doing every single day. And there's going to be more of it, so please stay tuned. Keep reading. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues in expressing enormous gratitude to the Ford Foundation for this honor, and it is a tremendous honor. Thank you. But I also see this as an acknowledgement and a reminder of the responsibility that our newsroom shoulders, as Travis alluded to. With the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, much of our country has decided that we are no longer at war, and that issues that impact those in uniform, the service members that we cover, the service members that are our sources so often, or service members that have worn the uniform and have since taken it off, can be quietly ushered aside. Many newsrooms have drastically cut their coverage of the military, and commensurately, many Americans worry less. But the cost of the decades of war that this country has been involved in are coming due. The impact on our veterans community, both those who saw combat and those who didn't, but were swept up in a wartime military, is massive. Some of our coverage in extremism speaks to that. These are, at its heart, veterans that were hurting, that were looking for answers. And perhaps they found it in the wrong places, but nonetheless, they had a need. And meanwhile, those serving today still encounter enormous risks and challenges as part of their service. The military community needs thorough, well-crafted journalism to make sure that the promises made to those who serve are fulfilled. And as a journalist, I see the challenge in telling the stories of the military community and the clear need for the role that we all play as watchdogs. And I'm glad to work for a newsroom where, as Travis said, our editor and our leadership sees value in that mission statement. As a Navy veteran myself, I know what it means to be a member of the veteran community. And I often go into work worried and fearful that I'm gonna let that community down, that I will not be effective enough in communicating their worries, their fears, their trepidations. But your acknowledgement tonight and this award reminds me that we're putting up a good fight, and there are places in this country and there are organizations such as the Ford Foundation that still honor this work. And for that, I am immensely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Drew. I'm the guy in the program who's pictured with his dog. I want to thank the foundation, my editor, Travis, who really didn't give himself enough credit for this project. A good project like this needs someone to captain it, and he played that role so we could have a great series of stories. I want to thank my colleagues, and my family. And last night, my colleague and I, Constantine, tested a few of the fine beers that this city has to offer. And when you get two veterans and journalists together, you often start exploring the questions of life and why. Why do this job, which is a difficult job? And for me, it's because journalism is a profession that is measured in moments with symptoms that can last a lifetime for the people that it covers. And I'll explain that. This piece that we are here for tonight took over a year. It took a lot of hard conversations, it took lots of work, and for me, most importantly, it took empathy. But as a reporter telling your story, I may only know you for an hour or a day or maybe a month or a year. For me, it may be a moment, but the story and how it affects the person or the institution at the center of it, there's a great responsibility there, and that can last a lifetime for those subjects. And so whether it's shedding light on special immigrant visas for someone who served alongside U.S. forces overseas, giving a voice to families and veterans who have been affected by the costs of 20 years of war, or asking questions about troubles with your loved one's military funeral, those are moments for me, but can be life-changing for someone else. And that's why it's meaningful to me. I don't take that responsibility lightly. It's a great responsibility that I think about and weighs heavily on me every time I put pen to paper. To be here is a reminder of that responsibility. And I'm thankful that our team has been recognized for treating it with care. And I thank you all for being here. Thanks.
Well, on occasion, when the citation situation warrants it, an honorable mention is given. And this year, we're pleased to announce Carla Babb from Voice of America is receiving honorable mention recognition for distinguished reporting on national defense. Carla, would you please join us on the stage to receive your award? At a time in which only a small percentage of the U.S. population serves in the military, Carla Babb has given the rest of us an up-close and personal look at how the war in Ukraine has shaped U.S. missions and the preparations for war by its neighbors. In the process, educating us on military strategy, training, weaponry, and the unexpected and important role of America's National Guard in training the warfighters. The visuals bring her written words to life and give Americans a better understanding of the risks, the stakes, and the commitment to democracy by countries fighting Russian aggression. Carla, congratulations.
Well, thank you all for being here to celebrate the Ford Foundation, and thank you to the Ford Foundation for acknowledging the work that we do to try to hold leaders account and also to tell the stories of these brave men and women that we have in the U.S. military. I had an incredible opportunity to meet with several of these men and women, whether they were on the border of Ukraine, looking at how the U.S. would protect NATO and defend every inch of NATO territory should Russia cross into Romania. I was also there in Estonia with some folks that were doing the same thing. And, wherever I went, it was the same story. They wanted to protect Americans, and they wanted to just do their job well. And I just want to thank them. This is really about them. We can't tell our stories. We can't do our jobs unless soldiers come to us and are willing to allow us to tell their stories. And I was able to meet some incredible National Guardsmen this year who were working. They were in Ukraine when right before Russia invaded and had to pull out 10 days before the invasion. Those National Guard soldiers ended up taking some of the lowest points of their careers and turning that into one of the highlights as they led the training and the equipping for the Ukrainians, the training and equipping that's still going on today. And also I was lucky enough to talk to some National Guardsmen from the North Carolina National Guard in Moldova. I should thank my editors at this point. Thank you, Aru and Barry, for letting me go to Moldova, because I go, hey, I want to go to Moldova to tell this story. And they go, really? What's in Moldova? But really, there's a lot going on in Moldova, especially with the Moldovans fighting a hybrid war against Russia as we speak. So I just want to thank them for allowing me to spend time with them, to get to know them, and to tell their stories. And I would love to also thank my family. My husband, Ryan Newell, is here with me tonight for dealing with a reporter, because part of dealing with a reporter is kind of like dealing with servicemen and women. You travel a lot. You have to go on a moment's notice. And so they've been very supportive in what I do to try to tell the stories of these men and women and hold our leaders to account. So thank you so much. And one more, if I may, because I am a broadcaster, I want to thank all of my videographers who have gone to all of these places and done some crazy things with me, because it's really hard to tell a story to begin with and to get men and women to tell their story to you and to trust you with their story. But then you throw in the factor of, but I really need you to talk to me on camera. And I really need to bring a camera into your training exercise. And I really need to bring a camera into this sacred space that you have. That just takes the difficulties that we have as journalists to a completely different level. So if it wasn't for my amazing videographers that have worked with me throughout the year, we could not tell their stories. So thank you so much.
My father had the very highest regard for the role that journalism and good reporting had in strengthening and elevating our democracy. And that is why these awards in his name are so important for the areas of the presidency and national defense. So again, congratulations to our Journalism Award winners, and keep it going. Okay, we are going to partake of a wonderful meal here, and I want to lead us with an invocation. If you could join with me as we pray. Gracious, loving God, we give you thanks for all the ways that you sustain us and bless us each day through the gifts of life and health, through the gifts of family and friends, and the gifts of our freedoms and our agency and purposeful work and vocations. And this evening, Lord, we are especially grateful for the lives and legacies of Jerry and Betty Ford. We celebrate and honor their exemplary leadership and service to their home community of Grand Rapids, to their home state of Michigan, to our country, and even, yes, to the world. We give thanks for Jerry and Betty's faith and values, their ideals and dreams that they have passed on to so many of us. And God, we're thankful for the men and women who have faithfully helped preserve and advance their legacy through the good work of the Ford Presidential Foundation, the Ford Presidential Library, the Ford School of Public Policy, and other national and local institutions that bear their name. And so, God, please be with us this evening as we share fellowship and stories and memories and hopes and dreams that honor you and that bless one another. Bless this food and those who prepared it, and give us and prepare us to serve you well. We ask in your name. Amen. Enjoy your meal. We will be back.
A former Ford Foundation board member used that shh. Rich DeVos, he did it very effectively. So good evening. What a wonderful evening we've had already, and we've got more to come. I'm Mike Jandernoa, and I've been the chair of the Ford Foundation for the last 2 years. And tonight I have the honor to hand it over to a younger and more experienced Dave Hugendorn after midnight. But you have to put up with me for a couple more hours, and hopefully you can handle that. We're here tonight to celebrate this Ford Foundation and this couple of Jerry Ford and Betty Ford, and what they meant to our country. But the fact that they were from our hometown here in Grand Rapids is quite impressive and very supportive. When we think about what's going on in our country today, we have a very divisive political situation in D.C., and we look across our country and the landscape, so many of our political processes are broken. But if we go back and think about President Ford and what we've been doing at the foundation to reach out and remind people of the outstanding example that Jerry Ford set from a culture standpoint, from a style standpoint, from an integrity standpoint. You just think about it. President Ford prioritized doing the right thing, even if it puts your political career at risk. Think about that. Do the right thing, even if it puts your political career at risk. Just make the best decision for our country. Not necessarily for you, and not necessarily for your party. Is it hard to think about somebody that's looking and acting and leading in that sort of a fashion today? Wow, just to have that back, it would be so nice for our country. In addition, he had an approach that he used throughout his career about being bipartisan, about listening to the other side, and about working together. We could all use so much of what he stood for and the way he approached his political career and his life. We could use that today. As chair, I've so appreciated the board of directors and the staff and what they've done to make our Ford Foundation even better. The board has clearly stepped up. We've had more committees than ever. We added a strategic planning committee. We added a building committee. We added a fundraising committee. We added a library committee. And thankfully, all of our board members were willing to step up and take that on. But for me as chair, I got a chance to go to a number of those meetings, and I could sense and feel, as the other members did, how much they cared and how much they loved what President Ford stood for, and how they longed to bring that back, and how they longed to share that with the rest of our community and with the rest of our country. So if I could just ask all of the board members to stand up for a moment so that we could recognize them and all the contributions they're making. In addition to serving on all these committees and taking phone calls and emails and so forth, they also provided us a lot of time, ideas, and energy for our feasibility study. And I don't have time to go into the exciting things that we've got going on with the feasibility study, but I can just tell you that we had such positive feedback and such enthusiasm that we are going to start a fundraising activity here very soon. So we'll have to talk about that later. But this feasibility study showed a lot of energy around not only West Michigan, but around the country for the ideals and the character and what President Ford stood for. And the commitment and the energy about helping to fund the education programs we have at the K-12 level with the DeVos Learning Center and the education from the Leadership Forum for college students, and all of us older adults can be included in that leadership forum. We've got a lot of energy and support to help expand those and to take them to the next level. Besides the board to thank, I've got the staff to thank, and Gleaves and his staff has really done a remarkable job of taking things to another and higher level and helping us reach out and share the importance of President Ford's legacy. You know, we've had this thing called the 50-year celebration. 50 years, I cannot believe it's been 50 years, but we've had a number of events already celebrating President Ford and the First Lady, Betty Ford, and all the things that she did, not only for our community, but for our country. But in addition to that, the staff has been expanding our partnerships. There's a wonderful school down in Ann Arbor that we really like, and down there that is called University of Michigan. I'm not saying anything with our speaker tonight, but we have a public policy school down there that we've been working with, as well as the Carter Center. We've taken those partnerships, and we want to take those partnerships, and in this world, in this situation, we want to take them to another level. And Gleaves and the staff have certainly done that. We've also had the chance, because of a couple of our board members, to build a very close partnership with the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. And we're taking that relationship to another level to increase our civic education, not just here in West Michigan, but to increase our civic education around the country. A lot of momentum, and Gleaves, to you and your staff, if you want to stand up and be recognized, we'd like to thank you guys for all that you've done. We are blessed, and we can take things to another level. So in just a few minutes, we'll hear from our guest of honor, Governor Daniels, in a fireside chat with one of our trustees, Roger Porter. And I'm honored to introduce my fellow trustees and co-chairs of the Awards and Grants Committee, who've already been up here for an hour or two. I mean, just they've been up here for a little while. Mike Ford, who's the son of President and Mrs. Ford, and Roger Porter, an IBM professor from the business school and the government school at Harvard. So Mike and Roger, thank you.
Before we move into the Ford Medal, we would be remiss if we didn't give great gratitude to our outgoing chair of the Ford Foundation. And Mike Janner, let me just say a little bit, because, you know, he's throwing around praise and thanks and these, you know, great words of gratitude, and they're all deserving. But Mike came in 2 years ago, had been on a trustee on the executive committee, and he was very gracious to accept the invitation to serve as chairman of the Ford Foundation. In, you know, as if his life was slow or, you know, kind of dull. You know, he's doing a million different things, and he has a beautiful family, and we had to kind of talk Sue into giving a little more time to the foundation. She's been wonderful. She's glad to get him back. But honestly, Mike Giannanoa has been such a beautiful gift to this community in Grand Rapids, but really to the Ford Foundation, because he really embodies, as you can see, all those qualities of focusing on the good in people, focusing on how to bring together difference and different partners and be able to solve problems and be able to kind of utilize, all of our trustees and all the great gifts and abilities they have on committees. We've kind of reorganized, got new committees, and everybody's had to kind of up their game a little bit on the board, and that's a good thing. But please join me in giving great appreciation to Mike Giannanoa. Each year, the Gerald R. Ford Foundation awards the Medal for Distinguished Public Service to persons who have served the public good in the private and public sector. The Gerald R. Ford Award, or Medal, recognizes outstanding public contributions by individuals who reflect the qualities and demonstrated by my father during his public service career, such as strength of character, integrity, trustworthiness, fidelity to principles in decision-making, sound judgment, decisiveness, particularly during periods of crisis, determination in the face of adversity, diligence, self-confidence balanced with respect for the views of others, self-discipline in personal life. That's quite a list of personal qualities, professional qualities, and so I know that my father is, most grateful to have that medal for him in his honor. And this year, the Foundation and our nominating committee has approved Governor Mitch Daniels as the 2024 Gerald R. Ford Distinguished Medal recipient. Can you please come up? Yeah. We have a citation that, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read because it captures this amazing person and leader. And this will go along with the medal to Governor Daniels. For more than a century, Governor Mitch Daniels has transformed every arena of public service he has entered. His service has left a mark in the legislative and executive branches of the federal government, business, state, government, and higher education. In every endeavor, his leadership has embraced qualities that merit admiration and that build trust between citizens and those who serve them. The son of Mitchell and Dorothy Daniels, Mitch Daniels was born in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, in April of 1949. His family moved to Indiana, the state he considers home, when he was 10. A gifted student, he earned his bachelor's degree from Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs and his Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University. Mitch Daniels' first great mentor was Richard Lugar, who championed the consolidation of the city of Indianapolis and Marion County. Daniel rose to be his chief of staff and followed Lugard to Washington, D.C., when he was elected as U.S. Senator. During a decade in Washington, Daniels went on to serve in the Reagan White House as Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and as Director of the Office of Political Affairs, before returning to Indianapolis to lead the Hudson Institute and the state's most influential think tank. In 1990, he spent a decade with Eli Lilly, the state's largest corporation, rising to Senior Vice President for Corporate Strategy and Policy. In 2001, Daniels returned to Washington as Director of the Office of Management and Budget. He was confirmed by the Senate by 100 positive and 0 negative, and unanimous, and served in the cabinet of President George W. Bush before returning to Indiana. Running for governor, Daniels won his first campaign for elective office and secured a second term with the largest vote of any elected official in the state's history. As governor, he reduced taxes, rebuilt infrastructure, and enhanced education. Upon completing his second term as governor, Daniels was selected as the 12th president of Purdue University, building an academic powerhouse and resisting any tuition or board rate increases during the decade of his service. Throughout his lengthy and remarkable career, Mitch Daniels has demonstrated the personal and professional qualities President Gerald R. Ford embodied: integrity, courage, patriotism, sound judgment, and strength of character, all of which qualify him very deservedly for the Gerald R. Ford Medal for Distinguished Public Service.
Mike, Roger, Chairman Jandernoa, and guests, thank you for that overly long and generous introduction. I feel I should point out I'm also a notary public. I don't dissemble when I say to you that I'm really glad to be here, and I underline here. First of all, I've had a few chances to be in Grand Rapids or this part of Michigan, and I've enjoyed every one. I tell you truthfully that this is the sort of community with the sort of ethic and history and communitarian spirit that America needs so much. We have a few facsimiles in our state, and I've always said that nothing that could serve our state better than to replicate them. So congratulations on the fantastic community that you built and always enjoyed here. Secondly, I'm so happy to be here because it means that we're not in Washington, D.C. You couldn't have done me a greater favor than to spare me a trip there. I was really struck when Gleaves mentioned Jim Cannon. I don't know how many people here remember him as well as I do, but the senator that I served, really the next to my father, the great figure in my life, arrived in Washington just as President Ford was concluding his service. And Jim Cannon had been one of his trusted aides, a great former journalist, by the way. And he became one of my first tutors in the ways of Washington and the ways of the Senate. Just a great, great gentleman. And much of what I learned about President Ford came from him and from his firsthand exposure to President Ford's integrity and character and approach to the office. I just now I'm reminded that when I went to the White House the first time around, Jim Cannon gave me a little statement that he had written upon leaving the White House about what service there meant. It was really a reminder that you're just a cog, that you're only, that you have no importance of your own, that it's all derivative, and it's about the cause and it's about the person you serve, and he knew that he had served the best. My one thought for this group is, please take seriously the assignment you have this year. This is really important to us all, that you, in any way you can conceive and your leadership can devise, that you seize the opportunity of this anniversary when people may pay greater attention than they might in a different year, to remind America of things that have been mentioned here already, of the importance of character and integrity and nation over self that Gerald Ford personified, and to whom history gave a rare opportunity to demonstrate and live up to. And secondly, to help remind, or in too many cases teach, an ignorant nation and particularly younger generations that we've been here before. However difficult, however grim, dark, as was said, this moment, it's not the first time around. And that America has found ways out of those dark corners in years we can all cite: 1860, 1974. So let's use the opportunity before you, all of us who can, to bring this to the attention of our fellow citizens, to encourage them and embolden them, and maybe let's all hope, as America has been able to do before, to summon forth men or women who somehow rise or are equal to the moment and lead the nation out of its darkness. You know, thank you so much for this this remarkable honor. I've had jobs where these things come along. Most of them you don't deserve. I think of them as ex officio. I'm sure Engler's got a closet full of them somewhere. But some are very unique and special. And I assure you that I'm not dissembling when I say that this one is. I've got some that are named after former presidents. Indiana had one president. I guess there's one of those. As it happens, I was given 2 or 3 over the course of time named after Woodrow Wilson, who I didn't particularly admire. But they were very meaningful as they came along. But his name's been taken off some of those. I'm not worried about the name being changed on this one. And I tell you very honestly that this is one that I will always revere, as I revere the man for whom it's named and the desperately needed characteristics that he still represents in the history of our nation. Thank you very much.
In life, we get the opportunity to choose, in some respects, whether we're going to be specialists or generalists. And if you look at Mitch Daniels' career, he spent roughly a decade doing 4 different things. One is serving in the federal government on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue in the Congress with Senator Lugar and the Republican Congressional Committee, and in the White House on 2 occasions, both in the Reagan and George W. Bush White Houses.
I refer to those as my 2 sentences served in the federal government.
And then he spent roughly a decade in corporate America, as a very successful executive with Eli Lilly. And he spent roughly a decade in state government, 2 terms as the very popular and successful governor of Indiana. And then roughly a decade as the president of Purdue University. I think it's remarkable that someone can succeed not merely in one aspect of life, but in 4 different
I thought it was
aspects
remarkable
of life.
when Mike said it was a century.
Well,
I mean, I was feeling a little elderly before that, but
so I'd like to begin by going back to your impressions when you arrived in Washington after the '76 election, which brought Richard Lugar to the Senate. And as President Ford was departing, is what your impressions were of him when you very first came in to Washington?
the obvious, he had risked his own career and political standing in a way that I think everybody saw, but we had just seen that he was paying the price. He took the risk and suffered the consequences. I don't suppose at the time it was quite as striking as it is today when you see so little evidence of that sort of bravery and selflessness. We almost see its opposite celebrated these days. Mm-hmm. That was certainly my first impression, and obviously we regretted the result very much. We were looking forward, the senator I served, to being a stalwart teammate in a second Ford or a full Ford administration.
Yeah. In the world of politics and public policy, there are basically two types of activities. One is the activity of securing elections, campaigns. The other is the experience of governing. And most people have a skill set that is attuned to one or the other, as opposed to both. But Mitch Daniels is one of the rare people who has succeeded both in running and winning campaigns, as well as successfully governing. The objective in winning a campaign is to defeat your opponent. It's a zero-sum game. But governing is a different activity because it involves bringing people together and building coalitions in a political system in which power is diffused. So I'd be very interested in your observations about what you think it takes to succeed in each of those worlds and how you have tried to marry those two sets of skills in your life.
Well, I'll say a word first about the nature of campaigning, which has changed a lot in the not that many years since I was involved in it. But John Engler and everybody here, I suppose, will remember, it wasn't very long ago that if you campaigned as a Republican, you had a stereotype to overcome. You're a wealthy, elitist, country club, can't connect with ordinary people. Mm-hmm. As a no-name first-time candidate, I felt a strong obligation to go out and confound that stereotype. And so that's the way we campaigned. No political mercenary would have recommended what we did. We got an Indiana-built RV, entry-level RV, drove the wheels off it, went to all the nobody comes here places, and relentlessly 16 months on the road, tried to demonstrate, convey the idea we're all in this together. Every place matters, every person matters, and so forth. And I think that had, more than anything, was the key to our success. By the end of that campaign, people who measured these things found out that we were seen as the side that cared more about people like me. Mm-hmm. Now, in the course of doing that, I learned some lessons that bear on your question, Roger. I've confessed freely that when I started out, I told the folks who had been after me to run, I said, okay, we'll do this. And now look, if we're going to do this, though, keep it simple, stupid. The other team had been in charge for 16 years. The state was fiscally broke and the state government was dysfunctional. So we'll just say, look, we're broke, it's broken, 16 years is long enough, QED. I wasn't out there very long meeting people by the literal thousands and tens of thousands before I realized that's not right. That's not the way, that's not responsible. And what we have an obligation to say to people, how are we going to make it better? Paint them a picture of how things can be much better. Mm-hmm. And by the end of that campaign, we'd almost overdone it. We had a huge list of things we pledged ourselves to do. We were maniacal about delivering on those things, and most of them we did. So my answer to your question is, my view became during that time and ever since that a person's responsibility is, yeah, you're out to win, but you ought to campaign to govern, not merely to win. And if you are able to prevail in an election, having told your fellow citizens what you think's wrong and what you do about it, then you have every right and a better chance to go actually get that stuff done. And so that was my view then. It's my view now. It has, there's some corollary, I think, implications. One of them is we were in 3 different elections, a hotly contested primary, 2 general elections, never ran a negative ad. I remember I made all the messages myself, basically, except if they wanted to get somebody to say something nice about me. But all the rest, I felt the obligation to speak for myself in my own words. And I remember saying just before that first primary, I said, here's a message to members of my parties. I said, this is the first time only office I've ever run for, and there's some things I won't do to win it. I won't disparage anybody's character, motives, or background. I won't compromise a basic principle. And that was a message aimed, honestly, as much at the non-Republicans as the Republicans, but it did express the viewpoint that, at least at the time, people seemed to react very positively to. All I can say is it worked for us. I hope in our politics it will begin to work again.
If you look at your career, both in the public and the private sectors, among the things that seem to matter a great deal to you is the concept of efficiency, of taking whatever situation you find yourself in and making it better or superior. Can you share with us how you found that applied when you came into the positions that you have had, both in the federal government and in state and local government?
Well, in business, there's no option. You either are more efficient, more competitive than whoever else is offering your good or your service, or you don't do very well. The government and in many cases in the nonprofit sector, government's a monopoly. There's a reason we try to minimize monopolies in our country, because they always take advantage of their position to overcharge and underserve their customers. So if you're in government, you do a crummy job, nothing happens. And so I had very, very strong views about this. When we did win that first election, we gathered a lot of people in a hotel like this one, and I said to them that every great enterprise I ever saw, any great endeavor of any kind, had a really clear purpose. And people, everybody in the organization knew what it was. It was on the wall, it was on the laminated ID card, it was, in the annual report if you had one. Pick your buzzword, it was the mission, the vision. And everybody knew what their role was in trying to deliver that. And if the place had its act together, somebody was measuring. And I said, that's really important to do in government. In business, the world measures you. Your sales go up or down, your market share goes up or down, your stock price, if there is one. And said, so we have to transplant in accountability. And that's what we're going to do. I always said as a philosophy of government that people who differ about everything else should agree on at least one thing. Whether you believe in a very big, expansive, intrusive, active government or something more limited, which I do, whatever that sphere of activity is, couldn't we agree that whatever it does, it ought to do it well? And that's just an orphan idea in way too many places. Everybody, you get a nice press release about the new thing, when the old thing may be, hopeless wreck. So we did that. I told them all, I did a lot of business with Walmart when I was at Lilly, and a lot of admiration for them. And, they had a saying at Walmart, if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. And so, they measured everything. So we did. The examples I always give, I said, look, we're going to fix everything in sight here, down to the smallest agency. And, but we're going to start on two things in particular: the Department of Revenue and the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Why? Because everybody deals with them. And I said, if we can fix those two things, people will they'll give us a little credit. They'll listen to the next idea. We're here to build some confidence in government. I told all my Republican friends, look, skepticism about big government is as American as it gets. But we don't want that. Skepticism about big government should not translate into contempt for all government. So we want our fellow citizens to feel as though their dollars are being watched carefully and spent as well as possible. And when people began getting their tax refunds back in 2 weeks as opposed to months, when they were in and out of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, if they had to go at all, in 10 minutes or less, they started paying attention to other things we were doing. And I think that gave us some political momentum to go do big things. Doing the little things well helped us do big things.
One thing that we all intuitively recognize is that we have limits in terms of the amount of time we have and the amount of resources we have. There's always more good things to do than we have time or resources to do. If I look at your record of where you chose to establish priorities, it tends to be on things that primarily benefit people not simply today, but in the future. Your emphasis on infrastructure and education, for example. Could you share with us a little bit about your philosophy of where we ought to be allocating resources?
I think the wellspring, for me, and I'd like to think this is fundamental to our whole national character and outlook, is that we value and place primacy on the individual and on that individual's opportunities in life to make their own decisions, to have the benefit of their own successes, and to take responsibility when they make mistakes. And I always said to our teammates, government, what we're doing here is really important, but it's not the end of life, and it's not the center of life, and we shouldn't think of it as the center of life. This troubles me when we obsess, as we seem to these days, about the federal government, the White House, as though they were, really all that mattered. Kurt Vonnegut, in one of his short stories, said that he thought that the president's limousine should have, if anybody remembers these, the rubber sticker thing with the steering wheel that your parents used to put in the back seat of the car to remind the president he's not really driving. No, I said, look, government, this thing that we're doing temporarily is something that men and women of goodwill should do if they get the chance, not as an end in itself, but to try to make certain that the other parts of life, the important parts of life, flourish. The places where people earn their livings, their families, the places where young people are preparing for their own future. And so that led us to emphasize things like those that you mentioned. I said to our fellow citizens many, many times, we're not going to kid you. Government can't solve every problem. But we're going to do everything we can to make it more possible for you to solve any problems you're having.
It's characteristic of a good evening that the time flies. So let me ask you one last question before we conclude. If you look out over the next 10, 20 years and ask yourself, what is it that gives me the greatest concern, and what is it that gives me the greatest hope and optimism, what would those two things be?
I'm deeply concerned about the debts we've piled up for our children and their children and their children, and we've waited too long and made things worse when we should have been making them better. And both parties are complicit, and history will look very, very severely on the leadership of this country, and frankly on us as citizens, that we didn't have the maturity to resist spending money on ourselves, consuming dollars today that will have to be earned and provided by subsequent generations. I'm very concerned about a world in which, and many thanks and credit to the men who are here who are covering national security affairs, and to the Voice of America. We're closer, I'm afraid, to some very serious national security setbacks than we've been in my lifetime or yours. And then finally, I'm deeply concerned about our loss of national identity. We have a young population coming up. Go look at the surveys of young people about their views of this country, whether they would sacrifice for this country. I'm not blaming them at all. They've been uneducated, rather, or in many cases, miseducated about our history. They don't know who Gerald Ford is. They don't know about that example that he set, or the fact that that sort of character was once, it was never ubiquitous, but he was not the only person who reflected values like that. And a nation that loses sight of its own, it loses morale, is a nation in trouble, even if we didn't have these other risks that we have. So what am I optimistic about? We have worked our way out of these problems before. I think many of the best Americans I know are those who have come to the country most recently. I saw a lot of them in the university. I saw a lot of them traveling a good-sized state, very diverse state, relentlessly for 10 years. Quite honestly, I've got a lot of hope that many of those who have come here, as people always have, with ambition and with hopes of their own, and have known, maybe because they know what the absence of freedom is like, they have known what America holds in prospect for them. It may ironically be they who lead us out. The next Gerald Ford may be somebody who just got here, or whose parents just got here in the last few years, and that'd be a great outcome.
Great. Please join me in thanking Mitch for his service and his ideas. That was true. That was really good.
Thank you, Governor Daniels. Roger, that was awesome. So I'm Dave Hugendorn. I'm taking over from Mike Jannernoa. And they asked me to make a few remarks about my history on the board. But in honor of my friend Peter Secchi, I'm going to be really, really brief. Couple of quick facts of history. Growing up, I was the center of my high school football team and one of the captains. And I'm also an Eagle Scout. My grandmother used to say, "You're just like President Ford." And I didn't think much about that until 2006, when I felt it was really important that my boys honor President Ford. And I took them downtown at 1 o'clock in the morning to stand in line and pass by his casket as he laid in repose. And I didn't think much about it for a couple years after that. And then I got a call in 2008 from David Fry and Peter Secchia. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but David Fry had been the treasurer for about a year. I don't think he liked it much. So they took me to dinner or to lunch. And in those days, I thought, well, Mr. Secchi and Mr. Fry are taking me to lunch. This has got to be a big deal, right? I remember going home, and Deb asked me, well, how did it go? And I said, I think I'm the treasurer of the President Ford Foundation. And, you know, that's how it happened. And let me just say, tonight it was an honor to spend time at the table with Judy Fry and Joan Secchia. And I can't thank you guys enough for what you did as your families and what you've done for the Ford Foundation. So thank you. So in 2008, I went to my first meeting, and I sat there and I realized I was the only trustee in the room at the time who had never met President Ford. It was a really interesting feeling. But here I am 16 years later, and because of my fellow trustees, I really do feel part of his legacy. And the only closing remarks I'll give about myself is, when U of M's not playing Michigan State, you will also find me on occasion saying, "Go Blue." So tonight I'd like to thank our sponsors. I'd like to thank our guests. I'd like to congratulate our journalism award winners, Tulo, Travis, Drew, Constantine, and Carla. I'd like to congratulate again Governor Daniels. And finally, I'd like to give away the bouquet at the tables. So for those of you that have a birthday closest to August 9th, not 1974, just August 9th, when Gerald R. Ford became president, please take home the flowers. Thank you for everything tonight.